So there are certain people who think that the government exists to provide goods and services at a time like this. And then there are people who believe that this is the time that the government needs to back off and allow the private sector to step in the gap and provide the goods and services that it can do and has done, which is why it's so successful at it. And whereas the federal government cannot do it. This is where I'm really, really confused with Mitt Romney. So Mitt Romney, Andrew Yang had already proposed this back when he was running for president. Phil Mattingly had shared Romney calls for urgent action on additional coronavirus response measures. And among those are, quote, immediately send $1,000 checks to each American adult. Literally, every American adult should immediately receive $1,000 to help ensure families and workers can meet their short-term obligations and increase spending in the economy. His proposals, that's literally the first thing. I'm not even making this up. This is legit the first thing that you see. And what good would this do? What would this do? Talks about telehealth services. Trump already talked about that. Easing financial burden for students. Trump already talked about that. Loan deferment for recent graduates. Blah, blah, blah. Trump already talked about this. Grants for small businesses. Trump already talked about how he's already met with a small business association, and SBA is actually restructuring their loans and all of that. But the top thing, give $1,000 to every American so they can meet their short-term obligations and increase spending in the economy. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I don't think you should call yourself a Republican anymore. Look, I understand that you think that that's going to help immediately in the short term. But first off, the precedents that sets. And secondly, instead of doing that, let's perhaps cut taxes. Let's cut taxes. Now you could say, but Dana, people aren't going out and purchasing things. They are avoiding crowds and everything else. You are absolutely right. You know what, though? I just realized we have this thing called the internet. And people have used it so much for shopping that it's developed that we have a new economic standard of measuring things like Black Friday after Thanksgiving. And retail success, because we are not just measuring purchases in brick and mortar stores anymore. We are actually measuring purchases online. And one of the reasons that brick and mortar stores have actually kind of suffered is because they haven't really suffered so much as they're transitioning to doing everything online. And the things that are still brick and mortar are now specializing in niche markets and more boutique-like offerings and structure. So it's actually become so successful that it could actually work. You can still patronize instead of patroning, as AOC incorrectly said. You can still patronize restaurants. You can still patronize businesses. You can still patronize the retail sector and everything else. Purchase online.